Well, let me congratulate you, Surendra, for always organizing very interesting events. And this one is particularly thought-provoking, as you said. US, India, China, Pakistan, a square, a circle. It's a very imaginative subject, with many dimensions, and should provide occasion for several interesting analytical permutations and combinations. You've already spoken about some of the things that divide us and some of the things that may potentially unite these four countries. I think it's easier to outline what are the factors that divide them, and we will really need a great deal of imagination and hope and optimism to outline areas where they can effectively work together in the international arena, bilaterally or regionally or whatever. The US, of course, in any arrangement of this nature, any combination of this nature stands out because it is, as you said, the only global power. And it has a long history of involvement in South Asia. But it is not a regional power. India and China and Pakistan belong to the same region, and they are direct neighbors with the United States. Is not. The US has had fluctuating relations with all the other three countries. Pakistan has been an on-off ally. China has been a strategic ally and now is becoming a competitor. India, for the United States, has always been a difficult commodity to handle because although we have many values in common, but our interests have not been congruent over decades. The other point is that the U.S. relations with China and Pakistan in various ways are stronger than the U.S. relations with India. The China-Pakistan ties, as you know, as described by the Chinese leaders, are higher than the Himalayas and deeper than the oceans. India, unfortunately, has had adversarial relations with China and Pakistan. And although our ties with the United States are improving, there are still many complications that remain in our relations. Now, all these four countries are nuclear weapon states, and there's a problem there because China has helped Pakistan become a nuclear weapon state and is still helping them. We just heard a few days ago that China is going to sell 1,000 megawatts nuclear reactors to Pakistan, even though everybody is worried about Pakistan being a failing state and its nuclear assets coming into the hands potentially of extremist elements. The U.S., as we know, has connived actually at Pakistan's emergence as a nuclear weapon state. They have been rather flexible in terms of applying their non-proliferation policy towards Pakistan. U.S. has, of course, sanctioned India for decades for reasons of proliferation, but now, in the last few years, it reversed its policies and, in fact, was key to accommodating India as a nuclear weapon state effectively outside the non-proliferation treaty. We have another anomaly where U.S. and China both supply arms to Pakistan, which bolsters Pakistan's capacities against India. Fortunately, U.S. Still has a ban on arms sales to China, and India has begun to buy arms from the United States. And then China and Pakistan claim Indian territory. Fortunately, the United States only claims our allegiance, not our territory. But the U.S. has been ambivalent on India's territorial integrity. It periodically underlines its support for China's territorial integrity, but fails to do so in the case of India. On the contrary, some of the positions they take on Kashmir actually suggest that they are leaving the question of India's territorial integrity a bit fluid. U.S.-China economic and financial relations are very intensive. Some people even talk about a financial fusion between the two countries. China is, as was mentioned, has become India's largest trade partner, but the deficit is enormous. And if things go on as they are, in the coming year, the deficit will amount to $40 billion. It is quite unsustainable. China-Pakistan trade, despite all the rhetoric about the depth of the relationship, the trading part is very small, and India-Pakistan still have to overcome some fundamental issues like MFN treatment and stuff like that. Now, both US and China are observers in the SAARC. US and China are permanent UN Security Council members. India aspires to becoming one, and Pakistan, of course, keeps objecting to India's membership. Not both, US, China, India are G20 members, which Pakistan is not. US, China, India, Pakistan are members of the ARF, but Pakistan is not a member of the East Asia Summit, which means that its role in developments in East Asia and Southeast Asia is relatively limited. In the Afghanistan issue, all four are involved. The US is withdrawing. China will certainly steadily fill up the vacuum as it has done in Central Asia. Pakistan still seeks strategic depth, and India's challenge is to retain its influence in Afghanistan. In the case of Iran, all the three others are opposed to military solution, but only US and China are involved in the P5+1 talks. We are an outsider. In the Gulf, all four countries have a major interest. However, US dependence on Gulf oil and gas is declining, but India and China's is increasing, and Pakistan, of course, gets concessional deals, especially from Kuwait. In Africa, US has limited presence. China has a rising presence. India has a historical presence which we need to preserve, and Pakistan is largely absent. In Central Asia, China is dominating. The US is influential. India is seeking access, and Pakistan, of course, does its best to impede India to have access to Central Asia. In the case of energy, China is far ahead in terms of establishing pipelines to evacuate oil from this region to China. IPI pipeline has been blocked by the United States effectively. They are batting for TAPI, but unless Afghanistan and Pakistan can be stabilized, TAPI will not see the light of the day. Insofar as terrorism is concerned, India feels it is the biggest target of terrorism. US, of course, has been a victim and is paranoid about this. China feels concerned about terrorism in Xinjiang. And of course, Pakistan has the distinguished honor of being the epicenter of terrorism in this region and abroad and in the world, in fact. And the point is that even though Pakistan is the epicenter of terrorism, interestingly, the US is soft on terrorism. China, of course, doesn't miss an occasion to laud Pakistan's sterling combat against terrorism. And India, although a victim of Pakistani-sponsored terrorism, has not been able to find a sufficiently strong language to deal with Pakistan in this subject. So we too are soft in our own way. Now, US is perceived as a declining power, China as a rising power. India is unable to rise fast enough in the views of many, and Pakistan is failing. The global equations are changing. Power is moving eastwards. China and India are the biggest beneficiaries. China, of course, would be the greatest beneficiary. We can be if we put our house in order. Pakistan, of course, is being left on the wayside. US and China are competing. The rivalry between the two, you mentioned the pivot of the United States towards Asia, the so-called rebalancing towards Asia. India is a partner in this, but not Pakistan. Pakistan, in fact, is giving access to China in the Indian Ocean, which US and India seek to dominate so that they can have a strategic leverage on China in the years ahead. On WTO issues, China and India are together against the United States, and so is the case on climate change issues. Now, the point is, can the four work together to contribute to Asian security? Now, US has suggested a trilateral India-US-China dialogue in the past. Hillary Clinton said that, but this has disappeared from the radar scene. Nobody has picked this up. India has a two-front situation with China and Pakistan as potent adversaries. Some may suggest that we need to balance this by coming closer to China, but we are reluctant because there is a certain lack of trust in the United States, and we want to retain our strategic autonomy. and some of the statements and actions of the new Secretary of State Kerry seem to have sharpened some of our misgivings. China sees itself as a rival to the United States. It is making overtures to India to dissuade India from joining the US pivot, but at the same time, there is no let-up in its territorial claims on India, as the latest spat in Ladakh shows. Pakistan's hostility to India can lessen, but in my mind will not disappear. Pakistan will counter India as much as it can in the international forums and in the Islamic world. Now I leave it to the other panelists to tell us how they're going to square this circle. I told you how difficult it would be, but we will listen with great interest to what they have to say. Thank you.